You're listening to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman on the Land of Israel Network.
Hello and welcome to Inside Israel Today, where we are less than a week to go before our Tuesday, September 17th election. And we have a treat for you on the show today. 2 interviews with politicians in the Tel Aviv area. I interviewed Stav Shaffir in Jaffa at a cafe, and then I had to go to the other end of Tel Aviv, to North Tel Aviv, where I interviewed Yair Lapid. The interviews are not in the quietest place on the face of the earth. At this point, when we are sitting here, we still don't know if Benjamin Netanyahu will be giving interviews. If he will, I will certainly make an effort to make sure that my interview can be broadcast right here on this network, in addition to being in the Jerusalem Post. Stav spoke about how she would like to see the election go, and she appealed to the readers of the Jerusalem Post around the world. Her views are very solidly anti-Netanyahu for many, many reasons, and she explains in her interview why she thinks that the country is headed in the wrong direction and why Netanyahu must be stopped immediately for the country's own good. You can see for yourselves whether she persuades you in any way. Here is the interview with Stav Shaffir from the Democratic Union Party, that is a merger that she brought about between the far-left Meretz Party and Ehud Barak and the Green Party, an environmentalist party that she left Labor to join to form this Democratic Union. What's going to happen on Tuesday?
Netanyahu is going to try to make a chaos.
The cameras?
Not just the cameras. From what we see, his strategy for this election is to create a chaos. It happened with a bunch of decisions that he made about people to get into very important positions, like the state controller, like some of the ministers and the people that they got into the ministries, all at a time where he is not an elected prime minister. He didn't manage to establish a coalition. He failed to build a coalition. He failed with his steps in parliament. So what he's doing now is to try to change the law. So to change the form of how elections are being done.
But who's going to get the most seats? How's it going to go? What's your prediction?
You know, that's not a question that I can answer, because I don't know. We'll know in the 18th of September. What I can tell you is that if there will be a low turnout, it's very bad for our democracy. And if people will show responsibility and go out and vote, which is the most important thing to do right now. And not only voting, actually. I ask people to also go and watch the voting places, because we're expecting a lot of surprises coming from the Likud party at the voting places. So we need people to not only vote, but to actually participate. And yes, people should cancel vacations abroad. People should, if they live abroad for a few years and their base is in Israel, they should come to Israel to vote.
Jerusalem Post readers that are citizens of Israel that are around the world.
And they care about Israeli democracy, yes. Get on the plane and come to vote. That's what people do when they're really afraid for their democracy. They act. They don't just write comments on Facebook. They don't just yell at how the situation has become so bad. They come and act and participate, and that's really important. You remember how the vote in Ireland, when Ireland had their national, what do you call that? The national vote, like
the referendum.
The referendum about abortion.
Oh.
You remember that a few years ago? So Irish people from all around the world came to Ireland to vote for abortions to be legal, and that was the campaign. Coming home to vote, and people showed responsibility, and even when they spend a few years outside of their country, they care for their country, they care for their nation, so they come and they participate. And what happened here in the last decade or even more is that people started to feel like they have no possibility to change anything. And it happened because of how the government acts, and it happened because of how the media acts, and creates that very cynical atmosphere around the elections, not even giving any platform to talk about the content of what the different parties offer. You see, there was no debate, definitely not a debate with the Prime Minister, who hadn't participated in debates for I don't know how many years. Definitely a decade.
1999.
Yes. So there is no debate, there is no possibility to ask them difficult questions. The whole tradition of democracy has been...
But, so even though you can't make a prediction, you see what the polls say, and they say not the 10 seats that Ehud Barak thought when he put himself 10th in the list, but 6, 5,
7?
7, and okay.
Yeah, that's 3 seats gap.
Seeing these polls just a week before the election, don't they make you regret not staying in labor and
allowing the entire
easier
left
way?
to collapse? Because that was what Labour was doing. If I didn't push and build the Democratic camp with Barak and Nitzan, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of the parties on the left would have not crossed the threshold. And the entire left could collapse because of a lack of responsibility by the leadership. I had to do what I did. That was the most responsible thing to do in the situation that we were in. We were in a situation where, because of really God knows what, ego, stupid perceptions of what, where to get the votes from, whatever that was the kind of lack of responsibility that brought us election after election into a failure. Because every time the center left went separately to the elections. Every time. 2013, there were 4 parties on the left and the Arab list. We lost. 2015, again, 3, 4, 5 parties, we lose. 2019, again, the same thing. But the difference is that in 2019, we got the trailer for what a parliament without democracy is going to look like. We saw that in May. We saw a parliament that is not democratic anymore. We saw where Netanyahu is going to lead us. He wants an Erdogan's Turkey. That's what he's going to do. If he wins again, for the next few months, he's going to change the law to stop Israeli democracy. That's his goal. I could not allow that kind of thing to happen just because my party...
Completely?
Just because my party or my political bloc is not behaving responsibly. So I had to go and do everything that I could, which included leaving my own party and build a new party. And trust me, whatever happens in these elections, the Democratic Union is going to be the future Democratic Party of Israel. And every party on the left and on the center left, every party who cares for a 2-state solution, who wants freedom of religion in this country, and who wants a decent socioeconomic policies, will be part of the Democratic Party. That's what we build right now. Labour and the other older parties in the camp have their very important historical rights and meanings. But the party of the future is the Democratic Union.
Do you think you'll be part of the coalition that you think would be formed within the next month or 2?
I have to tell you something else about this. To see, because you asked me if he's going to take democracy apart completely.
Yeah.
He's already damaged democracy very strongly. When he attacked, for the last few years, attacked the media and narrowed down the scope that the media is able to cover today, because he brought the media to its knees in so many senses, economically and with the kind of regulation that he pushed or threatened to push. The same thing he did with the justice system, including, giving Ayelet Shaked, who sometimes defines herself as, or mocking the sense of when people call her a fascist, she uses it as a joke, but is promoting actual fascist or semi-fascist towards fascist legislation, and definitely an environment. And so he heard the justice system, when he heard the media system, and he went against citizens for their own right to vote. When he went to the 2015 campaign saying the Arabs are coming in droves, what he's saying is that some votes are not legitimate. And that's a prime minister who's supposed to consider and think about what the entire nation needs and wants, even if he disagrees with some of them. Definitely not because of their race or religion.
But that means he's going to...
So he hurts democracy.
In another 2 weeks...
And that after
destroy
that,
our system, like
nominating a state controller that is doing what he wants and not serving the public. I had to go to court, to the Supreme Court a few days ago, to push the state controller to publish the reports, the missing reports about the government. You know about that, the ones. Same thing with the Attorney General. So he's already limiting democracy. What he will do after the elections, his first mission is to prevent himself being, standing in front of court. So he'll do whatever needed, including limiting the ability of courts to judge him, including, of course, limiting the ability of Parliament to make decisions. And the first thing will be Piskat Hitgabrut. Now, Piskat Hitgabrut has an influence on every part of our life. Think about everything that's related to human rights, human health, like, polluting factories, for example. There will be today many of the biggest environmental and health problems are prevented by people who go to the Supreme Court and stop or block a government decision that was not considering people's health. When he passes that, that's it. There is no court to protect people. So ask the people from Arad, who had to be in court for 20 years because of Gil phosphates, phosphatin in the Negev, or ask the people from Haifa, who suffer from enormous pollution because of the factories there, or the people who protested against the gas infrastructure. All of them are not going to be protected by court anymore. They will stop and cut any kind of regulation that will block the biggest tycoons and companies from, they usually today keep the biggest tycoons and companies from hurting people's lives. So it's not just what we call as corruption, and we look at what Bibi is doing. That's only the narrow part of the bigger picture.
Okay, but how can you do anything if you're basically doomed to be in the opposition? People in
how
blue
are we
and
doing?
white
Why
are
is that
saying,
something that the media continues to sell?
Because blue and white
The
people
last
are saying they
election-
don't want you in the government.
And the Likud say they don't want blue and white in the government. So maybe blue and white strategy is wrong. When Netanyahu says that he's going to do a government against blue and white, and blue and white continues to beg Netanyahu to get into his government, so the big mistake here is blue and white. We built the Democratic Union in order to change that paradigm that the center left is constantly going and begging a right-wing government to share some of its power with it. We don't want a right-wing government. We want a center-left government. We want a democratic government.
Who's in your coalition?
I just want to remind you that in April elections, Likud and blue and white got the same amount of votes.
Right.
You remember? In a democratic, a normal democratic country, what happens when the prime minister is not able to build a coalition? He has to go to the president and pass the mandate to Benny Gantz. He didn't do it illegally. So we got into very expensive, very dangerous elections because of Bibi's decision, because he knew that Benny Gantz is able to build a coalition.
Give me your ideal
So
coalition.
the same thing
Blue
happens
and white,
right now.
Blue and white, yourself, Labor.
Everybody who agrees to the basic grounds that I just described to you, two-state solution, a border for Israel between us and the Palestinians, a state that takes care of its citizens in terms of increasing social services expenditure, investment, and want a new decision about the status quo. I don't know if you saw.
I saw the plan from last night.
What did you think about it?
Very, very groundbreaking.
You were looking for the words?
Yeah, very different than you're hearing from other parties that haven't given it as much thought.
So think about that. For so many years, parties were afraid to touch the status quo. And the status quo became a block, something that freezes Israel, because we're unable to make decisions about...
Say the plan in 3-4 sentences.
Basically, it says, not the government, it's not for the government to make every decision about religion and state. It's supposed to be local authority. And the best people to make a decision about what they want in terms of their, it's very personal. Your marriage, your, God forbid, divorce, life, barrier. There are so many issues that are so intimate and are decided today by the Central Orthodox authority. While I respect people in Bnei Brak who don't want public transportation in Shabbat. And I believe they should respect me who do want to, visit my friends or family and prefer to take a bus to get to them because I don't have a car. So what we put as a...
You really don't have a car?
What?
You don't...
No, I'm giving an example, but I prefer to not use a car.
Okay.
Definitely. And in the city I drive when I'm not in a campaign. I drive, I prefer to cycle. So what we're saying in this plan is that local municipalities will make a decision about everything that's related to religion and state. So today, the religious, what do you call that? Religious councils in municipalities have an overall budget of 1.1 billion shekels a year. The local government, with a referendum, will decide, the people will decide if they want a religious council. If they decide not to want a religious council, the money from the religious council in Tel Aviv, for example, I think it's around 30 million shekels, but you should check me, and in other places it could be more or less. The people will decide where to take this budget to with a participatory budget system, which means that that's not for a referendum. That's the decision of local neighborhoods. They create a process of what do you call it? Like a public discourse with the municipality, where the neighborhood decides what's the thing that they want the most. Maybe they want affordable housing. Maybe they want a music center in their neighborhood. Whatever. They make a decision, and so suddenly they have a budget of like 10 million shekels to decide what to do with it. And that increases people's trust in their municipality and in their government, because they become part of the decision-making process. And it takes a lot of the money from that today's over 1 billion shekels that today goes to something that, most of the citizens don't feel its influence, into something that they feel for and that is useful for them. When it comes to marriage, again, referendum, maybe Haifa will want civil marriage, Bnei Brak maybe not. It's okay if you want to get married in a civil marriage. You don't have to go to Cyprus. You can go to Haifa. Same system about divorce. Same system about public transportation and Shabbat. And so people get their voice to make the influence on the most important issues for them. And I truly think that this is the way. Of course, there is another side for that. In Israel, one of the biggest discourse that comes to a tension point every elections is ultra-Orthodox army service. And it's a fake discourse. The ultra-Orthodox leadership doesn't want it. It's always creating a big chaos. The army doesn't feel that they need to get more ultra-Orthodox to serve. It's actually much more important to make improvements in women's service than to push more, 500 more ultra-Orthodox to the army. And it's much, much more important to get the ultra-Orthodox community into the job market. But nobody is paying attention to that. It's a really nice and populist campaign to go against the ultra-Orthodox for not serving in the army, and so every party is getting into that. What we're saying in this program is live and let live. They don't have to do the army. They should go into civil service. and to give to their own community or to other communities. And they are able to combine it with their studying if that's what they want. But the most important thing is to get a job and to start and increase the economy within the ultra-Orthodox community. And when it comes to every other decision, it's people's right to make a decision about their own life.
Okay. The last thing about the coalition that they haven't finished. The Likud can't be part of any coalition that you're part of, even in the post-Netanyahu era.
Who from the Likud? Which of the bunch of corrupt? I don't know. All of these people who are today are silent about what Netanyahu is doing to our democracy. Can they be a part of a coalition? I don't like. What's the difference? Those who collaborate today with the destroying of our democracy by one person who wants to escape jail, they are collaborating. They take the risk that Bibi is going to sell Israel for his own needs, and they use and participate in corruption, even if personally they are not corrupt and are not there are no allegations against them, but they collaborate with corruption. And they're not the only ones. If they'll decide to quit Likud and join a sane democratic camp, so maybe in the future, but they should change their ways, because for the last few years, they showed a complete lack of responsibility towards the Israeli people. Because Bibi is doing everything to escape prison. He's going to annex the territories, to escape prison. If you asked me a few years ago if Bibi is going to do an annexation of the West Bank, I would have told you, I think I told you that. There is no chance of that happening. He knows that will be the end of Zionism, because we won't be able to keep Israel as Jewish and democratic with 2.7 million Palestinians as part of Israel. There is no way to defend our security when something like that happens. So I didn't imagine that Bibi will go for it. But now, if that will be his key to escape trial, he'll do everything. He will sell Zionism for his own needs right now. And that's a risk. And the fact that he is breaking apart democratic institutions is something that I would expect every sane and decent person in the Likud to go against. But I don't see anybody except for Benny Begin, the only person who decided to say something. And anybody else, they're silent, and they're collaborating with all of these votes and all of this racist talk. He had a member of parliament from his own party just yesterday talking about, you heard that racist talk in the committee, and the Minister of Justice is sitting.
Miki Zohar, yes, saying that the Jews are a better race, a superior race,
and the person who is now the Justice Minister is sitting in front of him, not saying a word. Like, it's okay, it's accepted in the Likud, that kind of talk that should embarrass every Jew.
There was an editor who decided to send me questions for you. Let's see.
But just to get that,
yes.
So you have a welfare minister who is under allegations. You have healthcare minister under allegations. You have the former head of the coalition, same thing. You have a minister of culture who said that people who are refugees, she compared them to cancer. You have, and she, when she dedicated her entire term to go against artists and against the freedom of art. That's the kind of people you have in the Likud. What are we supposed to agree with them on? And why are we always going, and people from our camp, like Blue and White, go for that endless compromise? What do they want to compromise with them? Half a democracy? Because they don't want a democracy we do, we'll settle it on half a democracy? What? Half annexation? Half enforcement of every religious law in our schools? What? That compromise means that it's not Israel anymore. We can't compromise the most basic foundations of our country. So we need an alternative government, and that's a center-left government.
There's the video this week where they put in the audio, instead of saying hi to Bibi, they put in death to Rabin in the video of the party. You're familiar with the scandal?
Of what?
There was a video you put out yesterday.
What, the one from the demonstrations in Kikar
Yeah.
Tzion?
Yeah. They weren't saying death to Rabin over there.
In the demonstrations in Kikar Tzion?
Right.
Of course there are videos from there.
Okay.
You don't know the videos from Kikar Tzion?
They weren't saying death to Rabin.
Yes, they did. You have to watch the film Yamim Noraim. Did you see it? It's a film that Bibi is trying, that will not be published before the elections, but I saw it in the Cinematheque. It's about the last year in Rabin's life, and it's from the point of view of Yigal Amir. It shows all the process before he assassinated him. And you see, and it gets you back into all of these demonstrations where Bibi, as the head of the opposition, was the leader of the incitement against Rabin. And then instead of realizing just after that, and I'm sure that Bibi didn't want Rabin to be murdered, but he led the incitement. And if after Rabin's assassination, Bibi didn't do the obvious, responsible thing and say incitement is a threat to democracy, and things like that should never happen in our country. And instead of going and recognizing the fact that his political rivals are also Zionists and are also part of
just
Israel.
because my party already admitted that they doctored the tape and put in something that wasn't said there.
What do you mean? But that wasn't the demonstration.
They were all shouting hi to Bibi, and they weren't saying. There might have been a person or two. Shabak, I don't know. But they were
What?
saying- the masses were not saying death to Rabin at that
It's not the masses,
demonstration.
but there were groups inside saying death to Rabin.
Um,
Everybody knows this video.
Can you explain, when you're so focused on transparency, why you had a problem with the cameras in the polling places?
I'm actually for cameras in everything that's related to the government. I want every meeting of Netanyahu and the state, the Attorney General, to be documented with a camera. They had dozens of meetings, personal meetings, with no documentation, no protocols. Nobody accompanied them. It's the only time in Israel's history where the Attorney General and the Prime Minister under investigation are meeting privately so many times alone. So I want cameras to be how do you say that? Retroactively
Yeah.
placed in their meetings. I want cameras to be placed where the government makes decisions about laws, the ועדת שרים לחקיקה. I want cameras to be placed in every influence that the Prime Minister office illegally is doing on the elections when it's not supposed to serve the Likud elections, but to serve the country. So there are many places where I, as the former chair of the Transparency Committee, would like to put cameras. The Likud is not interested in transparency. And that's why their first decision after the elections in April was to shut down the Transparency Committee. That was Netanyahu's decision. If they cared for transparency and decency and to fight against cheating, they had like 200 years to prove it. That's not what he cares for. He put that bill on the table a few days before the election in order to create chaos. He knows that within a few days there is no possibility for the government to prepare itself for an objective overseeing of every voting places. By the way, I am for that. I would like to have cameras in the counting places, and I wanted to broadcast to a central website where every citizen will be able to see the counting.
Every
But-
polling station and
Definitely.
run by the Central Elections.
But what they try to do is not to do that, because they know that it's impossible within a week. They wanted to have access to dozens of Likud activists with cameras that will destroy the ability of people to go and vote cleanly and without fear. Just remember that a few months ago, they bragged about them lowering down the amount of the Arab vote because of their camera trick. So they tried to amplify that. And the other usage of that was for Bibi to be able to say, you see, it's the justice system, it's the media, it's the parliament that try to prevent a clean election. And that's something that he wants to say after he will lose the election. He will have an excuse for why he lost.
Then later on last night, Netanyahu went back to the Iran issue, and then later on Donald Trump said he has no problem meeting with Rouhani. Has Netanyahu, as he said it, saved Israel's diplomacy with America, or are we seeing a start of things going in the wrong direction?
I think that's one of the most dangerous things that are happening right now. Prime Minister using a real security threat for his own political needs during elections, using intelligence information, using the security forces for his own political needs before elections is a very dangerous thing. We remember what he did in 2015 elections, when he, for his own political needs, created the biggest turn between the biggest tier, or the biggest
Rift?
Yes, between the two parties in America around Israel, when he went to Congress to give a speech behind Obama's back, doing and damaging the most important relationships that Israel has with its closest ally, with the United States. I think for so many, he never hesitated to hurt our strategic interests for his own campaign. And the result of what we see today on the both fronts, there is the front, if we're talking about Israeli-American relationships, we see that within the younger generation, and today also with American Democrats, who most of them love Israel and care for Israel, but we see how Bibi managed to distance them from Israel within a few years, making every possible mistake. And the other side that we see is what's happening with Iran. And it is a very unknown situation right now, because Iran is a real threat on Israel, and it's using its power today on Israel's border, inside Lebanon, in Syria, in creating and encouraging terror, and of course continuing to progress their nuclear
Despite Netanyahu
fantasies.
and everything he's been doing against
Because
Iran.
what he's doing is not what you're supposed to do if you actually want to fight a nuclear Iran. And we said that long ago when there was the negotiation between the states and around the Iranian deal. We in the opposition said the Iranian threat is a threat to all of us, and there is no opposition in coalition in that. We believe that what Bibi's government should do is to go and collaborate with the deal making and make the deal better for Israel and safer for Israel. That's the most important thing that we have to do right now. But Bibi did the opposite.
Yes, my last question is, are you worried?
And when it comes to this, it's not about us and Bibi. It's Israel's future security needs. And we can't allow a nuclear Iran to happen. It cannot be. And the way to deal with it is, there is the security ground to that, and there is also the diplomacy track that is not less important, if not more, at these times. And the way to do it is with the United States and with Europe. And we have to, to get them on our side.
Last question is, do you see if Netanyahu and Donald Trump remain in power in the election happening now, the election happening in the United States another year, where do you see things heading for Israel's future when it comes to the relations between Israel and the American
Israel should be in the best contact possible with every American president, and at the same time it must be in the best contact possible with the two American parties. We should never allow that Israel will become a partisan issue in the States. And sadly, it's going there. And we have to defend both of our nations from that kind of result, because the connection between Israel and the States should be a connection between the people of Israel and America. And that should be above any political discourse. When I'm not going to influence American elections.
Okay.
It's not my position to do. And with every American president, we have to work with. What we have to do on the Democratic side is to go and start protecting and fighting for our values. Because when I see we just established the Democratic Party of Israel. It's only natural that we will have very strong connections with Democrats all around the world who understand that we have to stand and defend democratic values globally in front of right-wing populism. And what I see that people sometimes don't, or still, they see it, but are afraid to do something about it. The right-wing populist leaders work together all the time. They help each other in elections. They echo each other's voices. They share resources even. They push, conspiracy theories all around the world to help their political causes. While Democrats and progressives around the world are not collaborating. We have enormous threats that are global. It's climate change that we have to tackle together. It's the Green Deal that we have to fight for globally. What's happening in the Amazonas is all of our problem. What's happening with climate change is our global problem, and that's within the responsibility of every nation. We have to push for it together. And right-wing populists are trying to say that this is not a problem. So we have to understand that we also have to fight them together. And when it comes to global peace, it's also our global responsibility. When I see Democrats, dealing only with domestic issues in their countries, I think it comes against our own progressive values, because being progressive is also to take care for each other and to take care for the global society. Understanding that today, with growing freedom of movement, we see more and more moves between countries, more and more global citizens. But regardless of that, we have responsibility to make the world better, and making the world better is influencing. Is creating global understanding around how we help refugees, around how we tackle wars, around how we create, how we fight stronger and harsher weapon around the world, and also how we use social media for the better and for better democracy, and not against democracy, as sometimes it happens. So we have all of these global issues and global challenges to solve. To do that, we have to work together. And when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we need the help of the international community to push for better incentives in a solution, to help those who want peace on both sides to get stronger and be able to actually manifest and fight for peace. And when I see, we talked about it before, like how the BDS is eventually hurting the efforts of those who want peace, because it's only distancing us and it's creating more and more fear, and it's being manipulated by the right to push more people to the right. And it helps those who want to separate between us and not those who want to connect us, and definitely not those of us who want peace. So that's exactly, I think, telling you the syndrome of how Democrats are not helping each other. So my call is for Democrats globally to start and work together much more closely if we want to fight against right-wing populism and if we want to save our democracies all around the world, because democracy is being threatened. It's being threatened on so many fronts these days. The only way to fight for a better democracy is to do it together.
That was Stav Shaffir, who is the darling of the Israeli left, and her gamble in forming the Democratic Union will be tested in the election on September 17th. She might have made the mistake of her life, or she might have made an ideological choice that furthered her ideas. We shall see. After the break, we will be airing our interview with Yair Lapid, who is number 2 in the Blue and White Party. Stay with us.
The question is, why are the Jews there in the first place? The Jewish people have been yearning to return to their ancient homeland for a long time.
The Yishai Fleischer Show, the voice of a new generation of pro-Israel activists.
And there's only 2 kinds of minorities in the Middle East, armed or unarmed.
Inspiring minds to think differently.
That jihadism doesn't just attack Jews. It attacks Christians, and it mostly attacks Muslims.
Inspiration, spirituality, and politics.
So first and foremost, this country is here to defend Jewish people and to live in its ancestral homeland.
Listen to the Yishai Fleischer Show every week on the Land of Israel Network at thelandofisrael.com.
And we're back here on Inside Israel Today, here on the Land of Israel Network, on the landofisrael.com, where we are continuing our series of interviews with the number 2 candidates in parties in the center-left. Orly Levy does not speak English. He's number 2 in Labor Gesher. That leaves only Stav Shaffir, number 2 in the Democratic Union, and Yair Lapid, number 2 in the Blue and White parties. So you heard from Stav Shaffir at the beginning of this broadcast, and now you will hear from Yair Lapid in an interview that's focused on speculation on not only what can happen on September 17th, but in the election's aftermath. Here it is. Describe this country in 4 years if Netanyahu wins on Tuesday and stays in power.
That's actually a very good question.
Thank you.
Jonathan Franzen wrote that we live in an era in which hatred became entertainment. If Netanyahu will be the Prime Minister in the next coming years, Israel might become an Erdogan-like, pretending to be a democracy country. I think the institutions that hold us together, police, courts, opposition,
Media,
free media, and even the commanders of the army will become part of a puppet show instead of the beating heart of our country. And I think we will be singled out in the world as a country which made division into its defining feature. Thank you.
that made division its defining feature.
Yes. So I'm worried as I was never worried before. And this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is why I've established Kol Havan. This is why we need to win this election.
Okay.
And I want to say something else about this. I wasn't like that. I always had some sort of contempt to the fact that the Israeli left has always screamed that, the end of democracy, the end of democracy. I felt that this was exaggerated, and I felt this was being, they looked to me like drama queens. But now I think he has come to the stage. He's not the same person that he used to be. He's been crushed under these legal problems and under the fact that he's been in office for way too long. And I think that I don't think so, I know so. He's taking us to a terrible place, and he needs to be stopped. This is something that happened to him in the last couple of years. He wasn't like that, and I wasn't like that.
Explain me with the rotation, okay? How it works if the Likud and Blue and White have to form a government together. We're talking the post-Netanyahu era. Obviously, we're not forming a government with Netanyahu.
There was not a follow-up question in Israel Hayom for the same reason. I'm not giving interviews about what's going to happen after the election. Wait a week and we'll see. This is speculation, this is interpretation, and this is commentary. All of the above is your job, not mine. I am out there trying to win an election, get as many seats as possible and change the country. And right now discussing future coalition is, do you call it board games? משחקי קופסה.
Games, not just board games.
play.
Hypotheticals.
I don't have time to play games.
Yeah, we don't have time to. This is what the press is trying to do right now is to work on a puzzle that has no picture on it. I'm waiting for the picture.
Did you make him aware of my theory?
What is
Prepare
your
him
theory?
This is what I think is going to happen. I'm very honest in telling everybody about it. Benny Gantz is going to get the first chance to form a government because there's been a sway of 20 seats toward him, 10 of Lieberman from Netanyahu to him when it comes to recommending to the president, and 10 of the joint Arab list from no one to him. He gets the first chance to form a government and he fails. When I sat with him and he said that I asked him what happens when you win, when you get this chance to form the government, he says that's when the ultra-Orthodox are going to back down and they'll be willing to sit with Yair Lapid and they'll be willing to sit with Lieberman, and we kind of snickered, me and the person next to him, ha ha ha. But we didn't want to argue with him at that point. Okay, so he fails to form a government. Then Netanyahu gets a chance to form a government. Not only does he fail to form a government, during those 6 weeks from the beginning of November,
There's a hearing.
this is the indictment.
Yes.
The beginning of November to mid-December, when the state's attorney Nitzan finishes his job, they want to have the indictment by then. He gets indicted. So then the Likud will have to have a snap election. I don't know whether it's probably not during those 6 weeks, during the time afterward, and the loophole in the law that allows there to not be an election yet, that allows the Knesset to then unite behind a new candidate. We've learned a lot about this loophole. Everybody's going to be talking about this loophole. Nobody's going to want to go to an election.
Okay.
So then there'll be a Boris Johnson-like election. The way Boris took power by having an election in the Conservative Party that immediately made him the leader, that's what's going to happen here in the Likud. I still think there'll be a rotation, that blue and white will get the second part of the term, because it's still not 61 seats on the right. Then again, Lieberman could join them and they couldn't before, so maybe they'll say they don't need you. Lieberman will no longer send Netanyahu agenda because Netanyahu would be gone, but the leader of the Likud would form the government. And I wrote this on the plane on the way to Netanyahu's meeting with Boris Johnson.
Okay.
That there'll be an irony in retrospect that he decided to go there out of all the places he could have gone with canceling in Japan and South Korea and India and whatever.
Okay, so he just moved from journalism to script writing.
Really?
Yes. But there's one thing that I can at least relate to in this very compound version of reality you have described, is the fact that not only did I think, I know that within Likud they're not going to let Netanyahu drag them into a third election, and they're now quietly putting all the stones there for a quick shift within Likud. So it's going to be, I mean, everybody know who are the players. It's going to be Gideon Sa'ar and Yuli Edelstein and Israel Katz.
Not so fast.
Gideon Sa'ar, Yuli Edelstein, Israel Katz, Chaim Katz, Avi Dichter. All those people who are going to come and say, enough is enough. They're already saying this. They're saying this to you as well during nights. So it's one of those things that first everybody was just whispering about in the beginning, and now it's pretty prevalent.
Who of those potential leaders is acceptable? I mean,
Each and every one of them. These are acceptable people. I've worked with them before. I know.
you said Chaim Katz, by the way. I don't think you meant
Chaim is going to be part of the organizers. He's not going to stay in politics, I think.
but not one of the acceptable leaders.
Yes.
All the potential leaders of Likud other than Netanyahu are acceptable?
Yes. The ones with no indictment.
In your words.
This is my words. It's my words you're asking is just better than mine. Unlike Bibi, who had made it into a habit to try to interfere into other parties, I'm not telling Likud who should lead them. I'm just telling them we are not going to work with Netanyahu. And I'm telling you, they're going to tell him, we are sorry, but you have to step aside. There's one thing we do know. The president is going to call the leader of the largest party and he's going to tell him go and try and form a government. And therefore the one and only important thing right now is for Kahol Lavan to be the bigger party.
It's not the recommendations, it's the largest party?
It's the largest party, probably because it's a bit, maybe here there's a bit of speculation, but it seems like nobody's going to have a clear 65 or something like that. So if nobody has a clear majority, then it's going to be the largest party. And therefore the one and most important thing is for Kahol Lavan to be the largest party. Anything else or everything else right now is pure speculation. This we know. If you are voting for Labour or for Democratic camp, you're just throwing a voice or a note towards people.
You got it in. It's not actually true anymore with how it works, because the Lieberman factor and the Ayman Odeh factor, the Nachum Barnea interview, because it made the coalition building and the recommendation to the president be entirely different things. That coalition to Rivlin is a coalition that cannot exist in real life because it's a coalition of hate, not a coalition of love. You have hate. You have that in place.
Here's a quick lesson in politics, but not to you,
Okay?
because obviously you know too much about politics, but maybe to your reader. Eventually, politics is simple. It's not complicated. It is. Well, what's going to happen is the president is going to look at the numbers. He's going to say who's the largest party, and he's going to call the leader of the largest party and say go form a government, and then we'll see. This is how simple it is. Anything else is just because listen, like me, since journalists are part of the campaign trail, you've been in this since last October. It was going, and it was a municipal election.
To the beginning of October, when I was in Beit Shemesh every day and no one else was.
So you know what, even physically, we don't even remember anymore how is it not to be in campaign. And since you have to write every day, then you are now in speculation number 900,776 and 5.
Okay.
And therefore, you must be, if you're human, and you are, I know you, bored out of your
No, it just keeps getting more
with the
exciting.
simple facts of life. The simple fact of life is that the president is going to call the leader of the largest party, and he's going to tell him go and try and form a government. Anything else, we don't know.
So let's say you've got your 45 seats on the right, and you've got Lieberman, you've got 55 right there, and then you have last week's press conference of Ahmed Tibi, which was fascinating. The second most interesting thing in the entire campaign after Nachum Barnea's interview with Ayman Odeh was the press conference for the foreign press with Ahmed Tibi that I happened to attend, where he said, we know we're not joining the government, we want to be part of a blocking majority, Gush Hussein, and this is how it will work. They'll have their 55, and then they'll come to us, because there'll be nobody else who will want to join, and we'll say, fine, we'll keep you in power, but that costs money too. 64 billion shekels over the next 10 years for the very important cause of building up infrastructure in the Arab neighborhoods and making them look like a Jewish neighborhood.
How much is there is a program I've started when I was Minister of Finance, I'm asking you a question. And then it became in the last government, governmental plan for the Arab citizens. It was brought into the government by Bibi. What was the cost?
The one that Elkin and Levine are in charge of?
Yes, I think it was 50 billion in 10 years. But you know what, we'll check it out for you. Anyway, I don't understand the question there, but
You ruled out the joint list being part of a coalition. Can they be part of a Gush Qasem?
I have no idea. You don't form a Gush Qasem. It's something that happens.
Apparently
or
you
not.
do. I also thought so until I pressed conference. You have to pay for it. It's not free.
Says who?
Ahmed.
Yes. So you have to interview Ahmed Tibi about this. I am telling you, but at least you have asked a question about something that is tangible. You know what I'm worried about?
No, answer the question. Is it okay to have a coalition with the Arab Party?
No.
Is it okay
Because they're
for them to be
Zionists.
supporting a coalition and keeping it in power from outside?
I have no idea what are you referring to. I'm just telling you, you don't form a Gush Qasem. It happens or it doesn't.
You think these questions are speculation?
Yeah.
They're life.
No, they're not.
Okay.
They're not. They're pure speculation. I tell you something else though. The Arab citizens of this country have real problems that needs to be addressed. There's a huge problem of violence within the Arab sector that is not being they're not being taken care of is weird. It's not even attended to. There's a huge problem in education.
And you're in favor of solving it?
Yes, and there's a huge problem of infrastructure, especially in housing, and all these issues needs to be addressed. And we're going to address them because they are real citizens in this country, of this country. And the fact that the country ignored this is, to me, shameful.
Okay, then I'll ask no more political speculation. Now we'll get to the diplomatic speculation.
Okay.
So the Trump plan.
Yeah.
When he was asked about the Trump plan, he answered in an I know something you don't know kind of way. That he said, I don't know, but I've reason to believe that immediately after the election the plan is going to be proposed.
The problem we have right now is that Bibi was trying to tell us all the theory that he knows how to get anything from Trump. Right now, President Trump apparently is openly trying to negotiate with the Iranians directly. This can't be good for the Israeli interests.
Really, he said he has no problem with it. Do you have a problem with it?
Who said there's no problem?
Netanyahu said it. It was on the cover of every paper on Friday.
I think there's only one thing that really works towards the Iranians, and this is the sanctions. And when an American president is meeting with them, too many people might feel that there's a hint there about lifting sanctions, which I'm unhappy with. Besides,
so you're against the meeting?
yes, I think there's
You have
only
Yair Lapid attacking Netanyahu from the right on Iran. Good for you.
not for the first time. On top of this, we don't know much, even though we know some about the Trump plan. But I can tell you this, since there is a relationship, if the Trump plan was good for Netanyahu, it was probably published or leaked before the election, no? Don't you think?
Oh, so it's going to be bad for Netanyahu.
Yes.
So there's still a week left before the election to publish it.
No, they're not going to publish it before the election. They announced they're not going to publish it before the election.
All right.
So what we see here is that the legend that Netanyahu worked so hard to craft about the special relations he has with Trump seem to be debunked The problem was he was the smartest kid in his class since he ever. I mean, he has no other way of looking at himself but being this smart.
So you're going to be
He's mocking my English. Like Netanyahu is not doing this anyway.
As foreign minister, your main thing that you would start with is trying to repair the relationship with the Democratic Party?
With the Republicans, and I'm going to restore the bipartisan stature of Israel, to restore the relations with the majority of the Jewish congregation in the United States, to restore our relations with Europe, to restore our relations with the international institutions. There is a lot of restoring to do after the last 3 or 4 years, Netanyahu 3 or 4 years.
What is the question? I didn't ask him, but he wanted me to ask that he has a message to deliver to the world and to the readers of the Jerusalem Post, considering voting blue and white or maybe another party.
I have a message for them. It's on something that might sound very small to the readers of Jerusalem Post. There is about 350 million shekels missing on the budget for kids with disabilities in this country that no one in this government cares about. This government that has just passed 11 billion shekels to what Netanyahu calls the natural partners couldn't find 350 million shekels to open the year of kids with disabilities. This is why I'm running for office, because this is a disgrace, and this is a government that lost sight of what real prioritizing is. They are selling this country away because of Netanyahu's legal issues. For his immunity, he's giving them everything they've asked. They've been blackmailing him like crazy, and there's no money left for kids with disabilities. So this is why we need to change. We need a change in this country. And this is, you know what, 100 times more important than anything we've just discussed in this interview. This is my big message.
That was Yair Lapid, number 2 in the blue and white party, who, you never know, if everything goes his way, could be in a rotation for Prime Minister if Netanyahu loses the election bad. You never know. This has been Inside Israel Today, here on the Land of Israel Network, on thelandofisrael.com. We'll speak again next week as our election takes place. Thank you for being with us. Bye-bye.
Who are we as a people? Who are we as a nation? What does it mean to be a Jew in the land of Israel, as a Jew in Judea? What is our message to the world? We're finally back in our land, and we get to ask these questions.
Be'ezrat Hashem, we're going to make Judea and Samaria an issue for the entire world, to know that the Jews have a place in the world.
Israel Inspired with Ari Abramowitz and Jeremy Gimpel.